Though learning sharding may not be important for sharding or horizontal scaling is one of the key features of MongoDB and other NoSQL databases. In this section, we are going to learn about sharding, and I will be showing how to do sharding in simple 6 steps. Though learning sharding may not be important for developers, personally I love it as it is interesting and very simple to do. Sharding architecture is very simple. You can easily understand from this diagram. So we have 3 main components for sharding. The first one is the routers or the Mongos. Then we have a config server. Then we have shards. So shards are for horizontal scaling. So the real data will be in the shards. The routers will be communicating with the application, whereas the data about the shards will be kept in the config server. So the config server holds the metadata, whereas router is for redirecting the queries to the particular shards, and shards hold the real data. So a collection will be partitioned and it will be distributed across the shards using a particular shard key. So we have shard key for partitioning a particular collection and distributing across the shards. So these are the simple 6 steps we'll be seeing in the course to demonstrate about sharding. Prior seeing the demonstration, let me take you to the MongoDB documentation page for sharding. Sharding is clearly explained here. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 main components: shard, Mongos, and the config servers. So router will redirect the requests to the shards and it will be using the config servers for that. As I mentioned, shard keys will be used for distributing the data. We'll be using the test architecture, which is given under this title, Shared Cluster Test Architecture, under MongoDB documentation. So I'll be using one config server, at least one shard server. We'll be using 3 shard servers in our case, but for the test architecture, we need one config server, one or more shards, and one router. So we'll be using this test architecture for our demonstration section. Let us proceed to the demonstration now. In our test architecture, sharding can be done in very simple 6 steps. The prerequisite is that we must have a data directories for the 4 servers. I mean the 3 shard servers and 1 config server. So the step 1 is to create instances of sharding servers which will be listening in different ports. Step 2 is to create config server. Step 3 is to create a query router and link to this config server. If you see our diagram, which I have explained previously, the query router gets the data from config server, I mean the metadata from the config server about the data in the shards. So query router collects data from the config server about the shards. Then we'll be using the admin database to add these instances as shard instances, and we'll be enabling sharding on our database and the collection which is involved. Then we'll be using Mongos to insert data. Finally, we'll be validating the data among the sharded instances. So the same steps are given in list format here. Create data directories for 3 shard servers and 1 config server. Start the shard servers on different ports. Start the config server. Using Mongos, start the query router for the config server and specify the chunk size. Connect to the router, use admin database, add shards, enable sharding on the database and in collection, populate the data on the DB, insert the test data and validate the test data. So the same thing is mentioned here in simple format: create directories, start sharding servers, start config server, start router server, add shards, enable sharding in the DB and collection. So the preview of the commands which we are going to execute is here. We'll be using mkdir to create directories. Then we'll be using mongodb command to start Mongo instances, I mean the sharding instances in 3 different ports. You can see here. Then we'll be starting this config server. Note that we will be using the same mongodb for the config server also. Just the option is different here and here. Here we mentioned this as shard server. Here we mentioned this as config server. And we'll be giving the DB path for that. The next step is to start the router. Router will be linked with this config server. So you can see the config server port used here, as well as the router will run in an independent port, that is 200,001. We'll be specifying the chunk size, data just chunk size. I'll be explaining this while we are in this step in detail. Then we'll be using the admin database, adding the shards, and we'll be enabling sharding in the database as well as in the collection. And finally, in the database, we'll be inserting the test data.